think we start recording. Yeah, we did. Okay, let's start. Hello, everybody. This is Fanny Anzai Interviews. I'm your host, Fanny Anzai, and here today I have the pleasure and honor to finally have Logicked, entertaining responses to bad arguments with a focus on atheism and the banking religion for the last 10 years. Is that right?
10 years, yeah. Coming up slowly to 11 years, I suppose.
That's amazing. So we have a couple topics here, and starting with your channel and atheism mainly. Where and how did this start? Like your atheism and of course the channel itself.
Well, my atheism didn't really start. I mean, to me, the idea of that was always kind of a little bit of first a mystery of like what these church things are for that people have. And then, as I grew older, kind of a joke. And then as I grew more older, clear and obvious nonsense to me.
So you come from like a already atheist parents, would
Yeah,
say.
I would say so. I mean, for all practical purposes, at the very least, there's a little bit of mystery sort of shrouding my mom. She doesn't talk about that stuff, but I think like she never talked about it with me. It was never a thing. Um, Effectively, it's being raised by atheists. I think Dad would probably use the word atheist if pressed, but you know how it is. People don't want to necessarily just identify themselves by
It's
labels
an
for no reason.
interesting title that people avoid here in North America. But if you talk to most of people, nobody really believes in a personal God. So basically, everybody's atheist, but they just, like you said, they don't talk about it.
Hmm. Yeah, and my mom is one of those interesting kind of non-religious people who believes in reincarnation and a few things like that. So that's kind of interesting. I've talked to her about that occasionally, but I honestly don't try to change her mind on it or anything. I probably haven't talked to her about that in 10 years. Um, it's just not something that needs to be discussed, frankly. Uh, it's
Yeah.
entirely private. Like there was no influence of that in my life at all. So
So it's more like
basically,
they were liberal, so it let you find your way if you
very much
chose.
so. Yeah, even when I went down kind of idiotic paths at certain points, which I think everybody does.
Which
Um,
would be
well, I mean, whatever.
you believed in a
You
couple.
come up with some dumb thing when you're 13 years old and they go, "Oh, that's nice." And then a week later you're like, "Okay, never mind. I'm on to something new, right? Whatever." Um, and they would just go, "Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's very interesting. Yeah, tell me about that." "Okay, that's really interesting. Well, have fun with that."
Yeah.
Um, so very open-minded, open to letting you figure out your own thing. So, yeah, effectively brought up in an atheist house, but certainly brought up without God or religion. Even my friends didn't seem, to be honest, to this day, I don't know if any of the friends that I grew up with were religious. I think one of them definitely was, but that wasn't a close friend. So it was a very interesting environment where normally you
Religious
would
is
have
a
some influence
very
from it, but I
personal
I
and
just
private
didn't.
thing, huh?
Very personal and private. People did not like to talk about it, or at least with me. Uh, Maybe they knew I was the kind of person who would just laugh at it or something. I don't know. At that age, at the young age, nowadays, if people say that to me, I just sort of smile and nod, like, "Oh yeah, that's fine." You in person, right? Unless they engage with me, really is what
Sure.
it is. If somebody comes and argues with me now, it's like, okay, well, fine, we can talk, but
But
there's
it's easier to
absolutely
keep that conversation away since you keep your identity secret, huh?
right.
Is that something that, so in your circles, it's not something that your logic and people keep bringing up religions as a debate or
No, definitely
conversion?
not. Well, I live in rural Alberta. It's a pretty religious area, really. Um, So, and the thing is, I don't have a problem with that. Like, I don't have a problem with people having their beliefs. When I make my videos, it's in response to people who put their ideas out publicly and tried to convince other people with arguments. But most people aren't doing that. Most people are just living their life.
Yeah.
and that's fine. I'm
Yeah.
not going to bother them about it. They're not bothering me about it, are they? If they are
Exactly.
bothering me about it, then if they show up at my door and say, "Hey, have you heard the good news?" you know then it's a bit
Then you
different.
can have a conversation.
Right. Yeah, but I have a
Yeah.
lot of religious friends at this point, mainly from living in such a religiously influenced, at least, area.
We feel the
And
same. We're just a little closer to the shore here in BC, but it feels like it's still, I guess, it's the Bible Belt, at least what I heard here, because when I came at first, I was really impressed in Chilliwack how many churches, like almost every corner. You take a
oh,
walk and
really?
it's like, oh my gosh, there are so many churches around here. I
Oh,
thought I was coming to a different place, like because originally came to Canada to come to a more secular place.
hmm.
Because of my experiences as atheist in Brazil, I didn't want my kids to experience the same, and I imagined coming here would be better. And I just encounter all these religious groups, and like, whoa, it's at least, like you said, the daily life is much more secular,
Mhm.
and it's not like in the Portuguese language that there is God and religious terms everywhere in the language, like we
Right.
use because it's just part of it. Um,
There are figures of speech, but that's really nothing. Like, oh my God, whatever.
yeah,
But that's
then
not really religious language. It's to the point where it's so baked into the English language that it's not really.
and
It's not. It's not like this. I say it all
and
the time. It's
people.
not something religious.
And no, and like you said, people here live their religious much more in their temples and their private life than the outdoors. And, there's not that movement of conversion and evangelists knocking on
Mhm.
people's doors all the time, trying to
Yeah.
get the word out. You
Yeah.
find like pamphlets, there is always something on the mailbox, but and if you go to parks with kids, there, there are people evangelizing, approaching, very
Mhm.
often uh, in all this area, because then you move to an area where there are more Indians. They are very friendly and very not trying to changing people's minds, not so much as we would encounter in a Muslim community. There is a
Right.
big one close here, and we go to parks, and half of people there are Muslims. Not
Okay.
kidding, like dressed up, like with not the burqa, but just the mailbox thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is curious. I think a good type of multiculturalism. I would say a good doses of multiculturalism here, and
Mhm.
in a good sense too. People at least share the same values, which is I think is the most important thing. But yeah, and then there's all the Asians, which is from Christians to Buddhists, and well, yeah, it's very diverse. I think we talked about this privately, and you mentioned that it's like here was more of a white area in the past, which I've heard from Felix Rex too,
Mhm.
VPS, and he and I, it's completely changed. It's very Asian where I
Yeah,
live in Richmond.
I haven't been back to the area in, well, 5 years, but that was just sort of a brief vacation. But, when I moved away, that was 2007, so it's been a while at least. Um, and, at least the area that I was in was very much like that, where it was very secular, or at least private, and really just mono-racial, mono-ethnic, monocultural. Um, so yeah, I don't.
Yeah, now you would be surprised that whites are minorities. I can see a couple in the supermarket. I dislike a little bit of the Richmond more Asian community now with the COVID masks mandates and stuff because it's still strong. Because like I probably like the only person that doesn't have a mask in the entire supermarket.
Mm,
It's but you go in another town, just close like Abbotsford or Chilliwack, and people are normal there, live back to normal life. But federally, nationally, we still like in bad situation because they still forcing the masks, even in the airplanes. So
yeah, and the airplanes and stuff, yeah, they are. Yeah, it's
I
kind of
think it's the
weird. I mean,
only
everywhere
place, huh?
else,
Did you know
it's
that?
a little
It's the
strange, isn't it?
only
Where,
country that
yeah,
forces.
it's not been a thing for quite a while, and for some reason that's still an issue on the planes, specifically the planes.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I don't really know why, but oh well, whatever.
Well, they are with all the masks and the vaccine mandates on the plane, so it's feels a little bit of China there sometimes, to be honest. And it's not just making the joke about being in an Asian area, but it's really because of the, oh, you have to live like under my rules. And we're like, okay, I don't want to live under your rules. Can I leave? Like, no, you cannot leave, because if you don't pass through my requirements, my rules of like getting vaccinated, you cannot even take a plane and leave. And so feels trapped in a,
I definitely do feel like there's a point where you kind of have to give up on it. Like, there's a lot of people who still want to be in like pandemic mode, and it's, at some point, you kind of have to go back to normal. And I feel like we're quite well past that point at this point. I don't really, I don't really grasp why people are still panicked about it. I don't know, whatever.
yeah, no, here, I guess, involves a lot of politics and culture, because I don't know. At least I came to Canada because we feel like it's a better place. It's a freer, more secular, uh, strong, free North. And then when you come here, and now with all the changes of the last years, I think not just me, but many of the immigrants that end up here might be the most secular and more for freedom people in their place too. That's why they end up here.
Hmm.
Uh,
That's probably true.
feel down, but at the same time, and because of those politics, end up almost creating some type of a, let's say, like some people say, racism or xenophobia, which is understandable from the side of the white people that feel like completely shoveled from this area, that they cannot live. Like, it's super expensive living in BC. Go to Canada, go to Montreal. No, don't
BC is
come this
crazy
area.
expensive.
This is
I don't know how
crazy.
people. I honestly don't know how people decide to like move there and live there unless they're rich and retired. It's
Work, and I think nowadays most of people are sent here because they are rich. They like, you see, like,
yeah.
it's sports,
I,
expensive cars, and people like that are younger than us, and it's like, oh, definitely not
yeah.
this, their
Yeah, the
parents
island in
sending their
particular was
kids
turning
on
into a
schools
retirement
here.
community when I left. Like, it was becoming, all the young people were hopeless. I mean, I have friends who are still at this age working at McDonald's and stuff because, it's just not a place for work generally. I
No,
mean, I'm sure there is work, but it's
doesn't
not
pay
exactly
the
brimming
living.
over with opportunity, I suppose, is the way I would put it.
Doesn't pay the living, would not pay before, and right now is unsustainable. Like, you cannot really live one person by itself, with a normal salary, which was possible before. But now with the inflation, with the less things that happen, it's even worse. People really moving out, going to Europe. I have moved after I moved here. I had friends here from here moving out to Europe, and I have friends coming from Europe now, but they are going to Montreal, which is
Mhm.
cheaper area. And I was like, good for you guys.
Yeah,
But yeah, the
I really
politics
am glad
poisons
that
everything. It's like religions.
yeah, I really am glad that I moved out from like off the island. I grew up on Vancouver Island. I really am glad, and that was like south. It was, or do you know where Duncan is?
No.
No, okay. But do you know where Nanaimo is?
Yes.
Yeah, well, maybe half an hour south of that,
Okay.
and so pretty populated area of the island. Fairly, I mean, it's in
Yeah.
Victoria's sort of
Oh yeah.
vicinity bubble, kind of. Um, and man, I'm so glad I moved away from there when I did.
Yeah. Now here
Um,
is like a touristic area.
yeah.
It's more expensive than living in Paris, so I don't
I
think
didn't
it.
want to move away either. I was very upset at doing it, but ultimately it was the best choice because out here it's night and day difference. It's like living on
Yeah.
a different planet. It's
Yeah. We just
basically you
had
can just do what you
friends.
you know largely you're left alone to do what you want to do more than anywhere else in Canada. Obviously, you still have, government intruding into your life and telling you what to do at every turn. A lot of people just ignore a lot of it, frankly, and nobody really bothers. It's not like that in the cities.
Yeah.
It's only like that out in the country.
Yeah, yeah.
But
We had friends recently moving to the interior, looking for more sun and better price, like living prices. It's definitely something. So your channel, how do you produce? You do it all by yourself? You go to a studio? You made a studio in your house? Your
yeah, I have a
wife's
little.
channel, you help her and she helps
Mhm.
you. How does it
Yeah, I
work?
got a little studio in the basement, and then when I want to film, she just plays the clips for me, which I used to have to do myself. I used to not be able to see the screen, like I would have to retake stuff, and so I had to be able to see my cursor, so I made it like a giant yellow cursor that people used to make fun of me for. Um, but that was because I could actually see that through the stupid glasses and the
Mhm.
mask, and actually be able to like do takes myself. But ever since she's been there, it's much easier because she can just line things up properly, do a countdown, and then every little individual clip you're doing, you just do it that way.
That's
Kind of like
nice.
having a director, except I'm the director and she's more like the, I don't know, technician.
It
It
helps.
works, it's
Yeah.
my videos are very, very basic. Yeah, they're filmed and stuff, which is maybe more than some people do, but I see the editing some people do that is taking them weeks on end, even for a video the length of one of my videos. And I'm like, man, I do feel kind of lazy sometimes, but it works. You know, the thing is, I
The
started my
message is
channel
more
with
important sometimes than the
I
entire.
didn't start my channel as a visual channel. Like I went to YouTube because it was a place where people were talking, right? It was a place where something interesting was being done, but the visual part was never the interesting part. And so really the whole costume thing is just an excuse to have something up on the screen while I'm talking. Really what I want to be do is really what I want to be doing is talking into the mic and editing it. And I needed something to put up there. I used to like go to Google and every sentence or two try to find a picture to like match it and put that up. But then of course that takes forever. I mean, that takes even longer than way longer than filming, to be honest, a lot of the time. And then you get all kinds of copyright issues if you're not using like public domain stuff or like CC0. Um, so yeah, much easier just to film and then put a crappy background with a line down it, or a background with a tentacle that's missing color.
So you just like you do yourself recording, edit, and post pretty much in the same day. You take like
Oh no,
don't
it
super.
takes a while, especially when I have any actual work to do to figure stuff out. I mean, some of the videos I just saw it the other day. Um, Somebody did a response to a video that I responded to, or something very similar to a video that I responded to like 2 years ago, and it's um, somebody saying that like there's like this spider webby, bright looking, lacy thing on a black field. And in my case, it was like, look, it's a UFO or whatever. And I think the guy that this person was responding to was saying something very similar. Um, and I was like, wait, so this is the ISS live cam. Okay, what's the ISS live, whatever, ISS live feed, whatever it's called? You type it in, you realize they're looking at the ground. And so then you figure, okay, wait a second. What looks like bright spider webs on a black field when you're looking at the Earth from the ISS? Well, it's cities. And so, okay, now if it's a city, it's kind of a wheel and spoke structure. So, what kind of cities have that? And then you start looking around for different kinds of cities that it might be, and go through all this process. Um, that type of thing can take a while, especially if you're missing a lot of information. So, that kind of stuff definitely chews up time when you have to do that. Um, the person who was responding to it this time just said, like, I don't know, there was a Russian rocket that blew up, and that looks like an exploded rocket. So, that's what it has to be. It's not. It's Houston, Texas, from space. But so no, I mean, and the thing is, most of the time is chewed up either by finding stuff that actually suits the format, which I'm very picky about. I have to be able to like see in my head how this is going to work as a video. It has to be something where I disagree with basically every word that's spoken, because otherwise you're going to have large, boring segments where you're like, I either they're just saying something about like telling you a Bible story or whatever, or saying something that you actually agree with for 10 minutes
Yeah.
and then saying one silly thing, and you can't
So you
make
do that, you that picking the to pick the video that you're gonna the bank is like a suggestion, or you go fishing somewhere like
well,
out there, TikTok or whatever.
occasionally
You find.
suggestions, but suggestions are difficult. People will say, "Oh, I found this video and it's absolutely perfect for you and you should really do this." I've had people tell me I'll pay you $100 just to respond to this video that I want. And I'm like, "Well, yeah, but I can't though, because it doesn't suit the format. It's not going to work. Like
Mm-hmm.
you're not going to get what you want out of this, right? So
Yeah.
I can't, as much as I love $100 dropped in my lap, sorry, right?
Yeah.
I'll tell them no. I mean,
Yeah.
and then they
Sometimes
won't give me
it's not that idiotic for you to give a response or to.
right. Well, it's not just idiot. It's also the pacing and like you have to. I've done several hundred of these videos, and you get to a certain point where you can either see the potential or you can't. And I have a whole channel dedicated to just subscribing to weird, religious or conspiracy theory or whatever channels, just to that. And I'll go to that and like either use the recommendations from it or the subscription feed or whatever, and I'll just go through videos, sometimes for multiple days, just watching these stupid videos until I have an absolute splitting headache. Um, and I'll watch dozens of videos and end up with maybe one or two picks sometimes,
Wow.
depending if it's a slow month.
Yeah, so
Uh,
that was one of the questions, that if the amount, this huge universe of idiocracy that comes from religious people's mouth trying to,
yeah.
you know, explain their beliefs, if it would make it the job easier, because it's like, oh, I will do this forever for 100 years and never, you'll never be done.
Yeah.
Or if it makes it harder, because then you need to watch like that
Well, it's both
amount to
because
find.
I mean, regardless, you're going to have to find something that actually works. So the more material there is, the more chance there is of there being something at least. I mean, sometimes, especially like during periods like COVID and stuff, I don't want to get political. I don't want to talk about any of that, right? And so I avoid that I avoid that like the plague. I mean, that's no pun intended. Um but during that period when that was a really hot topic, oh my god, my subscription feed on that channel was so boring. I mean, there was nothing else people were talking about. Even like the people who normally are preaching about Jesus and stuff, it was like, let me tell you my opinion about COVID and something about the Antichrist and COVID and Mark of the Beast, and
Oh.
it was like, oh god, somebody has to talk about something else here because I can't handle this. This is so obnoxious. And whenever you get like a big topic like that, it always takes over, and so that makes it especially hard. But again, the more material you have, the more chance you have of finding something that's not that. If you only had 10 videos a week that you could sift through, well, you'd be stuck, right? Um, and then anyway, then you got to take the video and go through it, cutting it up, responding to each piece one at a time. If it's something a little more complicated, then obviously there's script writing for it. Um, Anything that's a collab, generally, I don't do many collabs, but those generally will have script writing, and that's especially complicated because you got to coordinate time with the other person and like sit down and go through it together and negotiate what's going to work where and how. I did a collab with Rags a little while ago, and we were in calls for days, like 8-hour calls for 3 or 4 days, just going through this script. Um,
Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah, there's a surprising amount. I mean, it seems very easy. It seems like, I mean, maybe some people are good at this. I know there are some people who are really, really good at just sitting down, looking at anything and talking for 2 hours about it and
Yeah.
being compelling doing it. I've seen them. But I don't know. That takes an exceptional talent, I think. And, I'm not going to claim to be an exceptional talent. I'm going to claim to be a person who like sits down and wastes a lot of time behind the scenes putting it together.
That probably makes more quality, which brings more views too, huh? And
It
that's why you're growing.
can,
Wow.
depending, right? There are some people who manage to put out exceptional quality just by talking, um, but they are really rare.
Huh?
Um, yeah, it's not hard. It's not easy. I mean, to do that.
So I imagine in some videos, for example, uh, I think the importance of us sometimes bringing up. I like to bring new atheists to, try to encourage more atheists to come out of the closet or
Mhm.
to just people that are on the wall. And I think we talked about this a little bit before we started recording. Was how many people end up like not being religious but not calling themselves atheists because the title might sound bad. There are
Mhm.
different types of atheists, and there is a bad straw manning that is probably more popular about atheists than everything.
Mhm.
uh
Yeah,
this
people associate atheism with
anti-theism.
like r/atheism. Like they're like all atheists are like fedora tipping weirdos who think that they're like always the smartest guy in the room, and it's just, you know,
And I think
I
there
mean,
is
I'll
a
make
lot of
jokes in
like
my videos and stuff, but I don't think I'm the smartest guy in the room. You know what I mean? It's like somebody makes an argument, I'm here to argue on the internet. That's what I like to do, and make jokes and just, have a good time. And I think that's acceptable. I mean, everybody on every side is doing that, and I don't think there's anything especially unusual about that. Um, but there are some people, there are definitely some atheists who really give it a bad name. But I don't think it's very rational to think of those people as somehow representative of everybody. And a lot of people do that. It's really strange. Um,
Well, I like one of your videos that is like it, what is the name again? Idiot atheists become idiot Muslim, because we even talked about some atheists that we know that were atheists and seem to be falling back to Christianity because they were not really atheists for the good
right.
reasons or with principles or understand the term or anything.
Yeah.
Many of them behave more of anti-theists sometimes, and
Yeah.
then it's easy to fall for becoming a religious for any stupid, like usually social uh, reasons. uh, but I think
Y-
that is the difference.
Yeah,
Like
I
that.
think that if you don't have good reasons for anything, that any position that you hold, if you don't have it for a good reason, you're very susceptible to falling for pretty much anything. I mean, you've already believed nonsense. Why wouldn't you believe nonsense again? And
Yeah.
atheism can be nonsense if you're like if your reasons are total crap. Like, I mean, if you haven't put
Yeah.
any thought into it, if you're just if it's like a feeling, more than a conclusion, you know. And if
There's a big wave now that I see with the new apologetics I call like Jordan Peterson, Prager U, which you have responded on his morality.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I think that we agree, which is the most common attack on atheists nowadays, is to say there is no such a thing as objective or secular morality.
No.
And
It's a little frustrating sometimes because, again, back to the thing of going through this big list of videos, that's another thing that tends to take over, because I think it's maybe an easier argument for people to swallow. Like, if you're not, all the arguments for God, like the actual, here's why I think God exists, have been chewed over so many times, and they're such easy targets mostly, because mostly they're just God of the gaps type of stuff. And so instead, a lot of the people are focusing more on the value of religion socially. And that's a different argument, really. That's a different conversation entirely. Has no real relevance on the truth of it, obviously. But I don't think they're always really putting forth that it does have relevance to the truth of it. I think the truth of it is kind of just taken as a foregone conclusion, and just talk about why atheism is bad. And atheism is bad because it makes all kinds of immoral people who have no reason not to steal and murder and punt kids off of bridges and
Yeah,
whatever.
I think what we maybe the thing that maybe atheism lacks is that this capacity of creating a community that will guide atheists to have those answers. Because if we can be good without gods, we should be able to explain why. And many people still seem to fall back to religious rituals and following because they think, oh, I don't have any other source of morality. So I think we do lack a community that could give those answers, because the religious people don't have the answers either. They usually ask their pastors, their priests, and I don't even think they have a good case for their religious morality. I think people that are religious or some or moral, despite their religions, uh, double standard moral values. I think one thing I usually put up out is like, I think there is such a objective, natural morality that we all individuals can figure out by experience, life going out, and interpersonal experiences teach you that really easy, that you want to have your body and your property respected. So it's a subtle bubble, this freedom and respect to others people's freedom.
Well,
uh,
it's objective if you assume similar goals. And that kind of goes back to what you were talking about, where if you have people in a society who are different, but they share similar values and they're trying to push things towards a similar outcome, then that works, right? So,
yeah,
if you have a society where nobody wants to live in like a blood-soaked hell.
yeah,
Nobody wants to live in a place where they can have people just run in, smash their windows, steal all their stuff, kick them in the head, and run away, and nobody cares.
yeah,
Um, I mean, that's not a society people actually want to live in. People might tolerate it sometimes in some places, but most of the people are like, at best, they're sitting there cowering in the face of that kind of behavior. It's not like they want it, right?
yeah.
So,
And as you
and I
mentioned,
think,
it's
yeah,
objectively good or bad, because if there are people that live on that, they can also objectively understand that is bad and there was something better to be achieved.
right, because they have a vision for their life that doesn't involve any of that, and most people are going to be on board with that. And most times in most places, and I'm thinking even of the past, people talk about the past like it was some kind of a nightmare hellscape. And I mean, sure, maybe things weren't as sort of restrained as they often are now, but people still had a strong sense of right and wrong, and that's coming from what they want from their life and from their society, and sort of like what they as individuals and communities have sort of prioritized for themselves.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think that's a really easy way to look at it, and within that you can make objective judgments about what works better and worse in terms of reaching those kinds of goals. I mean, it's objectively true that if you have someone going around killing all the kids in a neighborhood, that makes life far worse for the people there. That's
yeah,
just an objective fact. I mean, it's so even feelings are objective facts, the facts that people have the feelings. So,
yeah,
you're kind of right. Like, I agree that
yeah, yeah.
in
We
that sense,
agree.
it's
Yeah,
objective. Yeah.
yeah, definitely. And in the one usually point is that people before religious moralities, let's say, before the religious moralities, they already knew those principles, those simple the two principles of respect other people's bodies and properties.
Yeah.
And then religious moralities, what they call moralities, or the Ten Commandments, come to say, don't do those things, which the majority is about just praising the one only God.
And they say, aren't we
And then
original for having come up with this? It's like as if beforehand everybody was like watching their friends get murdered in front of them, and they were just like, oh yeah, this is fine. I got no problem with this.
and the God that would say, okay, it repeats, don't kill, don't steal, but don't kill, don't steal from your friends. But every other time that God itself tells people to do those things is fine. So that's when I say that the religious moralities is just the bringing up double standards to more to what was before morality.
Well, where the Ten Commandments stuff comes from is extremely tribal. You're right. Like it's very big. Like the
And by the
in-group
way, if
out-group
you
thing.
don't do any of the commandments, the punishment is death by stoning,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
supposed to not be, you're not supposed to
Right.
do.
But
But
I the thing is, I can even understand. I mean, I'm not endorsing that by any means, but like, the idea is to preserve the integrity of the group and to make sure that people aren't violating other people. Of course, a lot of those rules aren't about violating other people, so that's a problem. But nobody's saying that any particular
it's pretty much like
society
the
has perfect.
government. It's controlled by fear.
Yeah, exactly. Nobody's saying that any society has perfect rules, and certainly not ones coming from the top. Um, but yeah, I don't know. I think the
I might
trickier
think
part.
that we don't need the government or the church to rule many of the things they want to rule.
Oh
You
no, they
know.
way overstep their bounds. I could go all day about that. The government as well. I'm not big on that, but yeah, that's kind of a
So yeah,
semi-public. I don't really talk about that in videos because I want to, I keep things focused. But I mean, it's kind
yeah.
of it's pretty
I
obvious to people, especially like when I talk in my Discord and stuff. It's like, yeah. I'm not a big fan of I'm not a big fan of like random people telling you what to do with your life on every conceivable level,
yeah.
especially when every idea that they have is idiotic, pretty much. Um, but yeah, as far as morality, I think the trickier part of morality, because like the in-group morality is actually pretty easy. It's the out-group morality that's a little bit trickier, right? That universal respect. I mean, a lot of moral ideas are very based on like what I want for my people. Even my example that I gave before about like not wanting the person going around killing people in the neighborhood. Well, that's a neighborhood, right? It's like it's easy to focus on your neighborhood. It's not so easy to focus on everything. But then again, I mean, you have to focus on everything. I guess if you're going in and interfering with it, if they're friggin' drone bombing all across the Middle East or something, maybe then you have something to say about it.
Yeah,
I have a lot to
I
say
think
about that.
and that's why we end up always falling into politics, because I don't think all the culture change, all the movement, even when you talk about immigration or even about terrorism, might be a lot to blame on the external foreigner policies, um,
Yeah.
and
Oh, I think so. I think
war
ISIS
for sure.
was, to my understanding at least, kind of a product of the Iraq War. You know,
Yeah.
that resentment and hatred that comes from that. I don't understand why that had to be a thing in the first place. But whatever, they were bullshitting right from the start on that. But
It seems
again,
to
with the
have
the
some
joys of government.
financial gain always in the end to some group that is usually related or connected somehow to the government.
Yeah.
It's the
Isn't it funny how the strings all seem to point right back to that thing in the center?
yeah.
And it's not just America either. A lot of people want to just blame America. It's like I don't just blame America for anything. That's not how it works.
No, no, it's definitely it's more of ideas that proliferate in the high level of politicians and
Hmm.
make them take some uh, crucial decisions into involving themselves in war,
And that's the other
in
thing too, is like selfishness is as easy as basic morality, and applying basic morality to people who are just numbers on a spreadsheet is very difficult for a lot of people, and it's very easy to twist people away from, like, even if they start out as caring people, maybe um people can be taken for a ride. I mean, power and propaganda, depending on who you're talking about, the little people get the propaganda, the big people get influenced by the power trip.
yeah,
And that's pretty easy to do. I mean, nobody's saying anything that is perfect, but I mean, it's not like Christian countries have been any less susceptible to this than any others. I feel like that's a bit of I don't know, glamorization of actual history. I don't think that you have Christian countries that have had all their politicians and people behaving perfectly, and then you have all the other countries where everyone's a complete scumbag. I think that that's some people would like for that to be the case, but I don't see that being the case.
well,
I think people are very much just people.
right here in Canada is difficult because you see in other places where there is more of a political dispute, real dispute, as the United States, saying Trump getting into power, even being so hated, all that partisan left, right. Some of them, someone or the left or the right will be in power. Here it's more Trudeau has a different view of politics, I think, because he just has a power as a monarch, got the power pretty much
Mhm.
because my family, almost like down
Yeah,
power
I
to
don't
him and the
understand why
way that he
people.
behaves. Maybe that's why we're still under mask mandates.
Yeah,
It might explain a little bit this idea of the overreaching government that we have here might be because of the idea of the leader that
I don't think Justin
openly
Trudeau
says
believes
that
in the
he
concept.
likes China
Yeah,
and
I don't.
so
Yeah, he admires
sympathize
them. Mhm.
with communistic uh,
Yeah,
moves. Huh?
yeah, and the way he did the gun grab by like appealing to royal power, kind of, instead of going through the actual legislative process, and yeah, I think that I don't think Justin Trudeau believes in the concept of government overreach. I don't think he believes there's such a thing.
No,
I think that for him, the government
is
is like
above.
it's the parent of the people. It's meant to, it's always about. For one thing, he's always speaking for, not for Canada, but for Canadians. He's always saying Canadians think this and Canadians think that, and then he's always putting in rules that he say are like to protect Canadians. And it's like, no, but you're just restricting Canadians. You just.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing because he keeps talking about the government as the government grants people's rights and not the
Yeah,
government protects people's rights. So that's why he thinks he can just withdraw rights from
yeah.
people because
Well,
they
he said
didn't
just
fall some
recently
specific.
Canadians have no right to self-defense. He came out like he was talking about the guns, right? And he said, "Yeah, yeah, well, you have the privilege of using it for hunting and sport shooting, but Canadians have no right to self-defense." It's like, yeah, I fucking do. I claim that right.
Yeah.
So go to hell.
Yeah, the self-defense should be an inherent right and not something
Yeah.
that you need the government to
I
give
don't
you.
need the government to tell me what my rights are. I claim them.
Yeah.
They are my rights regardless. And
And
if you
that's when
stomp
they
on them, I
show
will
that
say
the
you are.
government is there to really take your rights away, not to
Oh
give
yeah, I
you.
think that's one of the prime features of it. I think one of the prime features of government in concept is to increase reliance on the government and decrease self-reliance. I really think that's a huge aspect of it.
Yeah. And you have addressed those cultural, or what I would say, the subjects on the free speech with Islamophobia or anti-Muslim motion blasphemy laws in Canada.
Yeah, back in
Uh,
that wasn't even a big issue looking back. I mean, the funny thing is it had cultural relevance, but it didn't have any actual legal impact or anything. But it was a little bit
I think that it has a quite an important cultural impact when it's still like it's that type of the entrism of that happens with the woke left in academics and politics or religionists into politics with even if they like they don't pass, but there are motions that change people culturally, and I think there are politicians that are, let's say, Islamists in Canada, and they brag about having more Muslims, that the community is growing, that they will get more power, that they soon will be majority. So it's a little scary, at least to say, for me
You
coming from
know,
Brazil because I'm running from religion, to come to a place where people talk about Sharia petition or
yeah. And
Islamophobic.
Islam is at this point in history, at least, is a vastly more intrusive religion. And people, for some reason, don't want to acknowledge that. They want to see it. They want to see Muslims as like an oppressed group or a minority group, and not actually see it as a set of ideas which are enormously globally influential and pushing into every sphere of
Yeah, I
everyone else's
think people
life
don't
across the globe.
realize they're like what, the six or seven, one over like one out of 7 billion or close to 7 billion.
Yeah, they're well
the
over a billion people.
the ratio, the proportion,
I
the
think they were
proportions, like
inching
they
up to
really
2
could
billion.
just
I could be
move
wrong.
out to one place and change
Yeah,
politics. Like
it's like maybe 1.5 to 2 billion people at this point are Muslim.
yeah,
And I understand that in some areas, you can have groups of anyone who moves in and doesn't fit in, and they get flack and trouble and whatever. I understand that. And in those cases, you can talk about that in the isolated cases, but you still have to be able to talk about the actual ideas that are growing in popularity in your country, and those generally, there are very secular Muslims, and
oh
there
no,
are there are ones who
that
are
is something we
very like,
really need to point out. I
yeah,
have secular Muslim friends.
yeah,
But that is another interesting point, because it becomes like in Brazil. In Brazil, they move politics and laws and stuff and policies with the idea that 86% of the population is Christian.
hmm,
And the way that I've heard these friends saying is that if you are, for example, now born in Turkey, you're not just Turkish, you're Muslim from born. They register you like that,
yeah,
and you don't have a choice. They say you have a choice, but like they themselves said, they have a choice to go there, call the government, and say they are not Muslims.
mhm.
They just don't
Yeah, that
feel
works out.
comfortable of doing it.
Yeah,
So it becomes a little of an issue
yeah, no, it's like,
when it becomes
especially
representative, of a representativity, like saying like, oh, look at how many Muslims they could move to, sometimes even sign stuff, petitions and stuff. Sometimes they do that move just by the
yeah,
clear pressure that exists.
yeah.
you know
They had this idea a while back. I think that was back when the Conservatives were in power in Canada. But they had this idea to put in like a Canadian values test just to see like, hey, what do you think about like the basics of being Canadian? Like, people are allowed to say what they think and believe what they think and wear, within reason what they want, and basic stuff. And it was treated like it was the most racist, disgusting, horrible thing anyone had ever proposed. And but like, look, you have to know who's coming into your country with what ideas, because this is the paradox of intolerance. The left loves to use the paradox of intolerance as an example of why you have to punch a Nazi in the head, which means anyone that you decide isn't far left. But the real thing is that if you can't um, you can't just tolerate any assault whatsoever. You can't tolerate every single assault on every single freedom and the entire foundation of your entire secular free society and expect it to last very long is the real paradox. And at some point
Yeah.
you have to say, like, look, you can come in if you actually want to be Canadian, support Canada, accept that other people are different from you and have freedoms and have rights. But if you don't, get the fuck out. You know,
Yeah.
don't come in the first place.
They say that, it's something, but I've heard a lot of cases on radio uh, talk about cases of killing for honor or
Oh
stuff
yeah.
like that, that they totally send the people. Sometimes they deport the people to be judged in their own laws, and
Mm,
they would just go to the street. They would not be, incriminated at all out there. And so
yeah.
I don't know. It's mixed feelings about a lot of this. I think it definitely one thing I see as the core, the main, and probably more important thing, we need to share the values. I think that's how immigration worked well in Brazil, when all the immigrants, like Italians and Japanese and so many other immigrants, went to Brazil in different times. But it was keeping, even many Japanese and Asian families, other Asian families that went to Brazil, keep the culture is strong in Brazil. They keep communities, they keep like little Chinatowns, blocks, or communities. Sometimes there are entire cities that are very Japanese, speak
Mhm.
Japanese, food and everything, like my father's town in Brazil. But at the same time, they mixed really well. They adopted the names. They wanted to, like, oh no, I'm gonna use first name Brazilian, Portuguese,
Yeah.
because we want. They had that will of be part of the community first, because I
Right.
think sometimes we face a little bit of sometimes too much segregation by its own communities. If you go to Montreal and you see the Orthodox Jews, they segregate themselves. There's nobody
Mhm.
separating from them. They do that by themselves.
Mhm.
If you come here, there are Indians community. The Indian community is very friendly, but there are other groups that will be like,
Well, they
yeah,
have
very.
they know how to get along with each other. They feel like they have more commonality, and that's fine. I understand that.
But
Um,
I think it's definitely there is this most important thing. We need to share the same values, including,
yeah.
there is a lot of social values that we might not share yet and might go under
Hmm.
the spoken, like it, because people feel like, oh, if I talk about this would be racist.
Hmm.
But yes, the Muslims with a woman treatment, the
Yeah.
equality thing is still not up there. And even the sometimes the people that are already here is still share those traditionalist values that might not fit our values. But in most of cases, and if you look, I guess I never heard of like a more of like a hate crime than what comes into the media, which I think it's just propaganda.
Well, yeah. A lot of them are, and a lot of the time they'll really blow up something that's not that big of a deal. Like some idiot punk kid decides to spray paint a mosque or something. It's
Yeah.
like, well, I mean, don't we? I feel like we have bigger things to worry about. But
Yeah.
yeah, I really think a lot of it goes back to, like, the thing with morality that I was talking about, where if you have shared goals, then you can make moral decisions. Well, if you don't, then you can't. So you're going to have a problem, and it might not be obvious right away. So, I don't have a problem with people coming to Canada. And,
Yeah.
I don't care what they look like or anything. All I care about is, like, are you here to build or destroy?
Yeah.
You personally, as a person, as an individual. And I don't think, like, if it gets found out that somebody is here with the intention of subverting the society or something like that, which unfortunately, radical Islam, I don't think people want to acknowledge just how radical means in that case. It's not like radical American Christianity or something. It's way beyond that.
Yeah. And I think there is still a lot to be reformed in their religion itself, because uh, some of the probably issues culturally speaking about this thing about values is that of course these people don't most of secular Muslims, even like the ones in Brazil, there's a big community. I have personal friends, Muslim, secular ones, or partially, because then this friend, which is my friend, her family, it's much more Orthodox. She has like sisters that were arranged, married, and used the veil, even in Brazil, which I think is crazy. It's too hot for that. But yeah, and the one thing I always had an issue when it comes to the moral values is because they would not be able to condemn terrorist attacks. And I was like, see, that is
Yeah.
the majority good inactivity that cannot, it's not endorsing, but cannot condemn, which caused a lot of the evil that they still need to go through, reform Islam, and that, the barbaric parts that still
Yeah.
exist in it.
Oh yeah, the polling data is pretty dire on that front globally, where there's an awful lot. Like when ISIS was rampaging around, there was a lot of approval for that. Ridiculous amounts, way beyond what it should have been. And approval and lack of disapproval are obviously different, like you say. And lack of disapproval was even more so. Very common, unfortunately. And
But it's crazy because there are all these underage arranged marriage, which is still happens even, they say, here in Canada, in North America. Imagine to happen things like this, it goes under the law. So it's a curious thing when you, as an immigrant, they like, you want your citizenship, you need to read those manuals and Chart of Rights and Freedoms. They don't follow their own rules. So it's kind of a sad.
right, yeah. No, it really is. It's like the entire.
I
I feel
like
like
the
a lot
one
of the
that
time
they
the
talk
entire.
about the freedom.
Right.
You're free to go anywhere. Canadians are free to go anywhere without restrictions. It's like, what about the vaccine passports? What about the mask mandates? What about all the places you cannot go if you don't have a mask or don't have a vaccine?
Yeah, I never supported the mandates. It's like, why? Look, ultimately, it's the person's own body. You have to convince them to put it in their body. And if you can't, well, I'm sorry. Like, I know that you're concerned about it, and I know that COVID is a thing, but you can't just like you can't create rules like that. It doesn't work. Basically, to be honest, my entire political philosophy is largely like you know it's mainly within the borders of the country, right? Like, I think the government has a responsibility to kind of monitor the borders and make sure that they know who's coming in.
Yeah.
But beyond that, like within the borders, it's like, if you say, oh, I have this new thing that'll give the government the power to do this, my answer is just no. I don't even want to hear it. Shut up. Just stop. Right? Make your case. Truth and justice never need coercion and lies. If you're right, you're right. Make your case.
Yeah.
And some people won't agree with you. Some people won't do what you want them to do, but probably most people will, if you're right. And so that's fine. I don't see the problem, right? And some people were doing that, right? Some people were just making the case, encouraging people to get the shot, and saying, here's why we think it works. Here's why we think it's a good idea, and please, I really implore you to do this. And then in other cases, where was it, like New York or something? They said, it was a while ago. I don't remember if it was the mayor or the governor or what, but some guy was like, yeah, so we asked you nicely to do it. We've tried doing it the polite way, but it didn't work. So now we're not doing that. Like, the polite time is over. It's like, oh, so it was never optional in the first place, is what you were saying.
Yeah.
Nobody ever had any bodily autonomy in the first place. My
Not at
body,
all.
my choice just goes right the fuck out the window. And it's like, I don't even have an issue with the vax. I just have an issue with the government acting that way. I have no issue with
Exactly.
the vax, right? The vax is
Yeah.
fine, whatever. It's fine. I don't, that's fine.
I've always
It's just
been in the
I don't
position
like
that
government intervention.
people want to take, like you said, the individual is the one that ultimately should care and should, measure this
Yeah.
risk to get the shot or get the disease. And like I said, what about the body autonomy, medical privacy?
Mhm.
So many things that people are screaming from the top of their lungs. And the next step is, okay, take your jab and shut up. You know, maybe
Yeah,
have
it really got to the point, and there was so much dehumanization of those people as well. Where it was like they're subhuman filth and they just need to be chained down and jabbed. It's like, dude, you have no right. Like there's no way that is acceptable. That's not acceptable in any other case, in any other sphere of human interaction. I argue with people all the time about stuff. I think people would be better off believing things my way and doing things my way a lot of the time. But that doesn't mean I can fucking walk into their house and like tell them what to do. I can tell them, hey, I really think that this is the right thing. Like if we're having a conversation, I can tell them what I think about it. And there's nothing wrong with that. They can tell me what they think about it too. But I don't get to cast them out of society and treat them like dogs
yeah.
for not going along with what I think. And I know
Well, we're
people say,
still
well, it
doing
has
that.
effects on other people and stuff. It's like, yeah, but a lot of things have effects on other people.
Yeah.
The But you have to have some kind of a boundary of rights, and for me that's way over the line of what I consider people's rights to be and have for a long time. It's not like something new that I came up with. It's like you can't force things like that in that way. And the way that people were talking about other people, like it's not so much now. I think people have cooled down a lot, mostly, but
Oh yeah.
some of the rhetoric was so violent
I
and
fear.
dehumanizing and cruel.
I fear that a lot of the silence that we experience now might have been caused by the authoritarian response of the government towards the freedom convoy.
Hmm.
Tamara Lynch is still in jail.
Oh, that's insane.
Uh, yeah,
Absolutely nuts.
yeah, and James Top went all the way to Ottawa, talked to some parliamenters, members of the parliament, and he's marching back because we didn't get to have all the restrictions lifted and all the situation turned back to, employees restituted, and we still forced the masks and the vaccine to fly. Not the one thing they released was the domestic flights, but we still cannot fly out of Canada without the vaccine. So yeah, there is a lot for them to get. So a big
Hmm.
march back to here to BC, to
Yeah.
Vancouver.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
That freedom convoy was fun to watch, and mainly it was just because it was like a big middle finger, um, in general, and it wasn't
it
it
was a
wasn't
really
just.
good energy. I went to many
Mhm.
many of the protests in
Yeah.
Vancouver, in Chilliwack, and I was really like we did like traveling around from Vancouver to Chilliwack and back.
Yeah.
Went to different spots. Yeah, a lot of good energy. Old people, kids, everybody there. A lot of moms, a lot of immigrants, a lot of Chinese people with signs saying this is not China. The feeling, like I said,
Yeah.
disappointed to come to a free, strong North
Yeah.
that
No,
should not just like it's.
even well before the vax, I was very disturbed, like with the lockdowns and everything. It's like, look, you can't just say that every single healthy person in the entire country has to stay home. You can't destroy freedom of association, free trade. You can't tell people who's allowed in their house and who's not, and how many people, um, who they can talk to, who they can see.
Oh yeah,
People have
neighbors
to make these
calling
decisions for themselves.
neighbors calling the police because someone has a play date with.
Yeah.
more
Like, I
of the
understand that it's
kids.
contagious, and that's the people's argument. It's like, well, it's contagious, so anything goes. It's like, no, it's contagious, but still not anything goes. You have to act within reason. This is absurd.
It's quite ridiculous. They hide the data and just spread more of, this scary narrative and try to avoid everything that would discourage or create any type of skepticism towards the vaccines in any way. And it's still really strong from the medical part. You go to the hospital, there are signs talking about the myths that the vaccines can cause
Well,
whatever they cause.
unfortunately, because of the government's abject idiocy or malice on this, I think that they have caused probably millions of people to never get another vaccine again or get their kids vaccinated, is my suspicion. I think that's what
Oh,
we're
right
going to
now
see
they
going
go. Yeah,
forward.
no, right now they're making a big campaign here in BC, coming for the 6 months to 4 years old. They just approved, and so they start spreading all the
I don't just mean the
propaganda.
COVID vaccine. I mean, I think they've created, and this is the thing with, like,
Oh yeah,
is it
then the
unintended
monkeypox.
consequences or is it perfectly foreseen consequences where it's like, now you've created so many people who the entire concept of not even just vaccination, but the entire field of medicine is out the window for so many people. And I know that. I talk to people who feel that way, and they didn't feel that way before.
No,
And it's disturbing the way that, and I'm not blaming it on them, I'm blaming it on the government because they acted so fucking abominably and
yeah,
untrustworthy. And what is the average regular person supposed to think who had to go through that? Who they're not scientists, they're not fucking reading dozens of research papers, sitting down to read the morning research paper with their coffee. Uh just regular people, and they have similar ideas to what I have, where it's like, if what you say is true and if you are in the right, you don't need force and you don't need lies. And yet
yeah,
there was so much force and so much lies.
yeah.
And then these people get these attitudes, and it's like, well, I mean, I was saying it right from the fucking start, at least not on my channel, obviously, because I don't, that's about one topic. But,
Yeah.
to other people, right from the start, I was like, this is way too far, and they're playing with fire, and this is exactly what they're going to end up with, and that's what they're ending up with. And it was obvious. It was so obvious to any thinking person what was going to happen. And they just didn't care. They
No.
didn't care, or they were too stupid to figure it out. One or the other. I don't know. But for some reason, people act like they're surprised about the outcome, about the distrust, about the anti-government sentiment, about the anti-medicine sentiment,
Yeah.
the anti-science sentiment. It's not surprising. It was so easy. You don't have to be a prophet to figure out what was going to happen.
Well, I think it raises the a little bit of the conversation of the last years when we talk about this postmodernism in the science and academics that came to kind of disturb the trust in the scientific papers when they came with the grievance studies and they exposed that the peer-reviewed studies sometimes are just a bunch of bullshit, and you have to go check the methodology because there's a lot of pseudo studies out there. So there is all this more of this, I think it is the important discussion to not just trust all science, but the science should not be something imposed, and the scientific method it's always trying to disprove itself. So why would you have this type of science from coming from government experts, government appointed experts
Mm-hmm.
to say this is the science and nobody can, debate it. That
Yeah,
is the
the
one part
shutting
that
down of debate was astonishing. And on YouTube and Twitter and Facebook and everywhere. Look, you know, there were so many people who were full of shit, and frankly, there were people who were full of shit on all sides of the issue at the through the whole thing.
Yeah.
There were also people who had valid points, and I also don't care if people are full of shit. I respond to people all the time who are completely full of shit, and I do not want them kicked off of anything. I
Yeah.
don't care what your opinion is. I genuinely don't care. I want you to be able to say it, and I want to be
Yeah.
able to hear it. And if I
Yeah. The
can't,
free
if
speech.
the yeah,
The
if the
free
response
speech.
is that I'm not allowed to hear what somebody has to say, there's a big problem there. I got a big problem with that. It's like, why am I not allowed to hear what that person has to say? Oh, but it's dangerous. Yeah. Well, I'll make up my own mind about whether it's dangerous. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Leave
You
it
know?
for the public scrutiny to decide. Definitely, if it's
Yeah.
a really bad idea, like you said, nobody's gonna buy it. Nobody's gonna follow.
Yeah. And I understand that misinformation is a thing, but it's not up to government officials without a brain in their head or random tech censors, which is some low-level idiot sitting in an office somewhere or some shitty AI. It's not up to them to make the decision about what's true and false. It's up to me for myself.
Yeah, it's pretty good. Thank you so much for giving me so much time. I'm like, oh my gosh, I said 45 minutes. We are for an hour and a bit,
Oh no, it's
and
not a
I'll
problem at
try
all. I
to
can.
finish now. The one last question, I guess I'm gonna go here through the notes because I always leave some curiosity here or put some question that's not mine. Someone asked me to ask you, what about the tentacles in your videos? What is that reference?
Does it need to reference something?
I don't know. My husband thinks like it's something about like some end of the world, the monster, something like that. And it's like I'm
Mm-hmm.
just curious to ask you what it comes from, and
You
why
know,
did you put that?
I'm not a person that likes symbolism that much. I like things very literal and very flat, and just to be what they are. People people think everything has to have symbolism. I think people took too much English class or something. They paid too much attention to their like 8th grade English teacher. And they're like, "Oh, what do your 3D glasses mean? What does that represent? Does that represent the dichotomy between calmness and anger, reason and rage? Does it represent the dichotomy between the cool rational atheist and the emotional fiery Christian? Does it represent heaven and hell?" No, the 3D glasses, I'm afraid.
You just wanted to put something like no, it's just the character to build
But see, to me,
scenario and the character.
the symbolism of a utter lack of symbolism says something, right? Symbolism is like mythology, and it kind of has a lot of relation to sort of religious thinking, where it's like you're not thinking about what is, you're thinking about what you want it to be. Well, I'm just thinking about what is. I'm not thinking about what I want it to be. It just is what it is. What do you want from me? The world might not be what you want it to be. It just is what it is. What are you going to pretend otherwise? Maybe that's the symbolism. And maybe I just want there to be tentacles. And maybe the reason I didn't fill in that one missing sucker was because I just didn't want to. People don't always know about the missing suckers. They don't notice. But once they notice, they can't unsee it.
The missing suckers. I
Oh
don't think
yeah,
I
there was
know.
one sucker that was not filled in. And when I got my second version of the tentacle background and recommissioned it, I made sure to erase the color in one of the suckers just to continue to annoy people. So if you look very, very close at those older videos that have that, you will see that a lot of the suckers are missing
I
color.
actually never paid much attention on the
Oh,
on
I know.
that to think if there was any symbol, and it was just like oh, from curiosity. But that, what about the tentacles? Is there some type of a
See,
monster, some type of
well, really, that was my house in hell, you see. My house in hell is very warped and twisted and doesn't quite make any geometric or architectural sense. And also, I mean, hell's got to be full of monsters, right? Like, you're not going to have hell that's not full of Lovecraftian nightmares. Surely.
It's pretty fun. I enjoy.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think we went through quite a lot. There was one question I actually wrote, and was more about uh, all religious. What I see more likely atheists, uh, straw men outside what the religious people or even the atheists that don't want to take that title imagines that we are anti-theists. And I think you could tell us, where would you position yourself? Are you like in the atheists? Are you already like, no, I don't really have any good reason? Maybe gods are really just bullshit and all religions are bullshit equally. The way that you kind of attack, not just, not attack, you just debunk videos about not just Christians, but also Muslims and other.
Hmm. So you're asking me if I have more of the atheist or the anti-theist thing?
Yeah,
Well,
on you.
I mean, anti-theist is kind of a subset for the most part of atheist. I mean, I guess I don't know. I mean, there can be some value in like religious thinking and believing in God and stuff. You were talking about the social thing before, and I mean, there is some value to that. I don't really like things. I don't like where to make something work, you have to believe something that's not true. Again, I mean, that seems to be a common theme that we're talking about here,
Yeah,
and you can pretty much predict what my ideas are going to be on basically anything just based on that. Where it's like, is it actually real what we're talking about, or are you telling me the truth, or are you twisting it? Are you holding things back? And do I have to value what you're saying if you do that? And I kind of don't, for the most part, in any circumstance. Um, that said, I mean, it's not like, I mean, look, if I could convince people to understand how to lead a good life as just a regular person and not feel like they have to tie it to some kind of supernatural idea that, frankly, if you pull that rug out, they're just left dangling with no idea which way is up and down. Um, if you can convince people to not have to rely on that, that's probably a good thing. Um, but I'm not like rabidly anti-religious. Um, I was much more a long, long time ago, but that was kind of when I first got the first smack to the face, um, realizing just how deep religious belief went and how silly it could get, which specifically was like young Earth creationism and stuff. Um, but even then, it was never, this has to be like obliterated off the face of the planet, and it's literally the cause of all evil, because it's not. Um,
yeah,
some, but not all, and I think that goes for most ideas. And the control aspect as well, there's good and bad to that, but again, it's built on shifting sand. Like it's not really something that um I feel like the ideas to me are so obviously flawed, and sort of the arguments are so, they kind of presuppose God, and then they try to argue for it. It
yeah,
seems to me a lot. And I don't think that's feasible. I mean, I guess it has been in some circumstances where you could really get people like completely surrounded by other absolute believers and really lock them into it, but that's not the world we live in. Um, Religion's falling away, it's eroding, and it's going to do that regardless of whether people like me make videos or not. You know, we're a symptom of that more than a cause of that, I think.
yeah. I
And
agree.
if that's going to be happening, it's not really helpful that people tie their entire sense of, like, the way they interpret the world, the way they interpret how to interact with other people, everything is so interlocked with that one idea, and if you get rid of that one idea, it all falls apart, at least temporarily. It's not healthy. So, I don't know if that counts as anti-theist. I mean, it's
Well, yeah, I would say that would be anti-theist and like the simple idea of that. It's like you already being convinced there are no gods out there. You know, just like yeah, I've been exploring quite a lot, and you know, doesn't seem to really exist any god out there. I think the main importance of that in the cultural level is that people still giving their credits. You know, I see people that are well succeeded in life
Hmm.
and they're successful because they worked hard for that, and they
Hmm.
don't give themselves the credit for that. It's kind of the sad part of it. But
It
I
can
get
be.
to read and all the way to like different nuances in between people's beliefs and stupidity, like because I think why religion, why beliefs are important to me as an atheist is because I see that beliefs really make people change actions or act, you know, and the beliefs end up enacting in life, in real life, because people are moved by their beliefs
Hmm.
doing something or others. And there are people that do really evil things in the name of religious beliefs. Now, what I get more annoyed from all these new apologetics trying to convincing people that they need to go back to religious to avoid the end of the world, which some people superstitious believe that all the signs, pests, and you know, disease and the world going like that is wrong is the end of the world. So apocalypse is coming to whatever other stupid beliefs is that they claim. You know, that is the part that is annoying me the most is like the religious people claiming morality. For me to say like, oh, someone that is good and doesn't hurt other people, you know, doesn't kill, doesn't steal, that is, it's something that is only with God you can get there. You know, to claim
Hmm.
that this is religious morals, it's like annoying to me, just like racist people say, oh, if you're successful and polite, this is white thing. You know, if a black person
Oh
behaves
God,
like
that
this,
is awful, isn't it?
so that is the comparison that I make and how I feel annoyed when religious
Yeah.
people come out and say like, because you know, not killing and not stealing, this is come from God. It's like, oh, just stop that, please.
What was it? Wasn't it like the Smithsonian Museum or something put out a thing about white behaviors, and it was like being on time, um,
I was like,
working
oh.
hard.
And it's like, who said this is what you fucking racist? Yeah, that's like
Oh,
that,
that's
but that is
awful. I mean, that
yeah.
that is so fucking racist
Yeah, and
against
that is
everyone
exactly
but
how
white
I
people.
feel nowadays. That is the level of it. So that's why we keep talking about, you know, against, let's say, these religious indoctrinations that don't make sense. Because I think first of all, we might not have talked enough about this religious, all religious or bullshit, and all religions have been beaten epistemologic by reason a long time ago. It's just like people really don't go through that thinking, and it's like, oh, it's easy to just stop. God said so. It's one only book I need to visit, huh? Is that easier? So I think it's yeah, laziness and a lot of indoctrination and this cultural idea that's like you have to have God in your heart to be moral or to be good. You know, this
Yeah, I
is
really think it would be
down.
helpful. Well, for one thing, like people don't generally spend their time, for one thing, doing what we're doing, which is like sitting around and having conversations about ideas and things. That's not a common thing to do. That we're unusual in that sense. It's hard to motivate people to do that.
Yeah,
It's
most of people are uncomfortable with this long conversations and going through those topics.
and it's hard to get people to really try to divorce themselves from like their cultural inputs, or peer pressure, or advertising, or all these things that are influencing them from outside. And nobody's perfect at it, but you know if you know to try, like the minefield you're walking through, and you know what traps there are, you can manage to kind of disentangle your thinking from that. um it's hard for people to do that, so that's something that has to be, I would almost say, like, trained, but it's hard to do that too. Like, you can't uh I don't even know how to solve that problem.
Well, yeah,
But
that is a interesting question. I have been listening to one of the Scott Adams books that I don't actually have a printed copy, and he talks a lot about retraining your brain, rewiring your brain to different things. Sometimes diet, sometimes habits, exercising, and
mhm,
I think that is another thing that you only. It's something that definitely only the own person can unlock, or trigger that thing is
right.
curiosity. I
Hmm.
think I've always been curious of finding God if it existed, because I didn't really get convinced by the Christian Catholic concept at first, and I
Hmm.
still felt the pressure, the social pressure to believe something. And so I went to different churches, believed in many stupid things, like I said. And but I think there is this need of like maybe have a more secular society, more of a these conversations out there, or philosophical uh, exposure, so people can perhaps be curious. Some people will never be like maybe curious by themselves to like go read their own book, or you know find out other. I've had talked to people in Brazil that when you mention like your God is just one in between thousands of gods, there are
Hmm.
people out there believe other things, and they like what they they were like
Yeah.
mind blown with
No,
the.
it really takes so much work to actually build an idea for yourself, or like build. You have to get s- so much input, and then you have to do so much like thinking about the things that you already believe, all your assumptions, your fundamental assumptions especially. um and then you have to like listen to all kinds of things from all kinds of different sides and try to piece something together that makes some kind of coherent sense, that represents the world in a way that you think is accurate, um and isn't just a product of influence from others, be that from religion or TV or whatever. It's a hard project. That is a really hard project.
It
And
is
I
it.
don't think it's likely that that's going to be a common project for people to do. I mean, there are definitely, I think there are more people doing that now. I think the internet has opened up a lot of that, despite all of like the weird censorious conduct of all these companies. Even so, like there's so much there's so much more of a mix of ideas and people. I think we're going through a really big social transition phase right now. A lot of like the fury of people towards each other is people had some people over here had these basic assumptions, and some people over here had those basic assumptions, and they just got tossed into a pot together. They used to probably all live in their little areas and interact with their little areas, and now the entire world is tossed into one big pot, and we're basically duking it out and figuring out uh I don't know what idea is going to what weird mix of ideas, what Frankenstein ideology is going to come out of this that maybe gets people to stop being at each other's throats so much.
Yeah,
I have
I
no
hope so.
idea where that's going to end up.
That is what I see, and I hope here when I see my daughter playing with the Muslim kid, with the more secular Muslim kid, and Indian, and Buddhists or Chinese from different sects, and already mixed. So there are other generations. They already mixed too sometimes.
Mhm.
So it's for me, I was like, when we talk, when we see it, this group, like very, heterogeneous, very multicultural, we all end up agreeing with the party. Like we hope they can manage their difference, keep some of the tradition, the good stuff, and
Mhm.
be secular in their lives to be able to accept those difference and live here in peace in the future. I
That's the
think
really
that's
funny
what.
thing is you're absolutely right. And even if you just talk about like political tribes, like setting aside, ethnic and sort of cultural, that kind of thing, but like just like the political tribes, I can see the good in a lot of what people say who I disagree with, even the people I consider raving lunatics.
Oh yeah.
I can kind of see sometimes what's motivating them, and I think that they're very misguided in the way that they go about solving it. But a lot of the times there are somewhat similar priorities there, and maybe you could find some common ground. Unfortunately, typically when you try to propose any other solution other than the one that's been pre-decided, you get your head bitten off, and then in
Yeah.
this day and age, maybe
Well,
somebody tries to burn your house down. I don't know.
hopefully, I feel like the politics went wrong because at least my generation, we were like very far from politics, or you were like in that career, or you didn't want to talk about, you didn't want to, it's something that is of course personal, private, but at the same time, it was something that maybe you should have talked a little bit more and be more involved than to find out, no, right now everything is so wrong, and how we change those things feels like uh, pretty much we can't do much. Mainly here in Canada is very plastered, the politics here. But what I imagine is that we can pass at least those ideas to our kids and slowly reduce the government to the minimum necessary. That would be like in the federal level. I believe I'm very libertarian. I think government should not rule marriage, abortion, guns, things that if you ask me or I ask you, you're going to say it's not your business. So it should
Right.
not be governmental business. And
Absolutely. I agree with that.
vaccines, medical stuff. So for me, I think we can pass at least those ideas to our kids, try to tell our politicians we want them less in our personal lives. We don't want more communism. We don't want socialism. Don't want to be told how to live. I think that is the ultimate freedom of the individual that needs to be preserved, because the individual can only be happy if he can make choices and be really free to make choice, and not this type of coercion with jobs, with not being able to travel, not being able to go to place or not get services. So in the future, maybe our kids are going to be able not to enter politics, but to at least vote and shape uh, not just culture, but politically speaking, more free and strong north for Rio to in that sense, like to have a
Sure.
government to rule in a national level, just the things we all agree that they're just like we don't want anybody to kill and steal from other people. Can you set that? That's
Yeah.
good enough. And then the
Yeah.
rest leave for the states, because then I think we are just like another United States of America, Canada.
Yeah. Very
It's
similar.
that
Very similar
big,
difference.
and the states, the provinces are that different and should be able to rule themselves.
Yeah, and local areas as well should have a lot more control over themselves, because I think there's a lot
Oh,
of, like, if you compare, out here in the country to Edmonton or Calgary, yeah, that's a pretty radical difference in terms of how people want to live their lives. And they can live their lives however they want, but they shouldn't be trying to assert it over us. So I don't even think provincial is granular enough. To be
yeah.
honest, I think maybe county level, maybe
That's right.
something like that.
Yeah, probably.
Because it really, like, it constantly feels like we're being ruled by aliens, and I don't mean immigrants or something. I mean
Hmm.
people from another place with
Yeah.
totally different ideas. People in Edmonton are not country people. They're not town people. Generally, they have a radically different idea of how they want to live. And that's because they live in a city. And a lot of the time, a city doesn't work without some weird authoritarian crap going on to, like, make it somewhat functional. Um, but that's not needed outside of that context. So we're being ruled from there, and then we're being ruled from Ottawa, which I've never been east of Saskatchewan, you know? To me, like, it's people who I have nothing in common with, you know. You were talking about me and another YouTuber and saying, I'm Canadian, he's Canadian. Yeah, that's a really different kind of Canadian. Like, that's like saying Californians and Texans, right? I mean, that's
Yeah.
an awfully different kind of Canadian. Um, and that's who is making the decisions. We out here, we don't make decisions.
Yeah.
We vote and then we hear who they elected before our votes are even counted.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know
Yeah.
where I'm going with all
I
that,
think
but
no, but
yeah.
I think that is definitely a problem. What I saw this morning, even post retweeted, was Trudeau traveling without a mask in the train, while he still forced everybody to mask and have vaccines to travel, and in airplanes or outside of
Yeah,
Canada.
but he's the
So
prince. He can do what he wants. I couldn't
that is
believe
one of the
people
things. I
elected
think that's
him.
why that for them is so easy to impose us things that they are not gonna suffer at all.
In I used to really be blown away by this like idea that Americans could, with all the potential presidential candidates, they managed to elect two Bushes. I was like, are you kidding me? That's insane. How does that happen? And then, oh look, two Trudeaus, father and son, just the exact same thing. Isn't that funny how that works out?
Yeah,
I,
sad.
I I was blown away. I was like, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
How is that even possible? Well, it's possible by, I guess, I don't know, just pushing the guy in your face, and I don't
I
know.
guess the Americans can make that joke saying that the Canadians were so jealous of them that they even commit that mistake after that.
Yeah, no kidding. Even, do you remember the original, like the first conservative campaign? It was like Justin Trudeau, he's just not ready. And it's like, yeah, he's destined to be the prince. He's going to inherit rulership of the country, but just not right now. Oh, good job on that campaign. No wonder you lost, you fucking idiot. That was the worst political campaign I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah,
I've never
that's
seen
why I
such a
say
bad
he
catchphrase.
wasn't. Yeah, so bad. Well, I kind of like have to say that I wasn't in Canada and I had good expectations, and I was actually kind of rooting for Trudeau to get into power. Like because I thought he was like, oh, maybe a new generation that will be like, fight for justice. If he sees some
Mm,
corruption, he's gonna point it out.
yeah.
Had this idea of some type of like a freedom
Well,
fighter, of the
you
new
say you were outside
generation.
of Canada though at the time.
Yes,
Well, that's
yes.
why, because I know how the media portrayed him. And the media did
Yeah,
not portray him accurately, and the foreign media, especially outside of Canada,
he
just
was pretty much the only option. It's like,
they made him like a rock star. They made him like, oh, this is the greatest thing that's ever happened to the country. And we were sitting there like, oh, fuck. Oh, shit, this is going to happen. Us in Alberta, I mean. Probably in Ontario, they were all coming.
then they legalized weed. We liked it. We like, okay, let's go back to Canada. Trudeau is gonna be a good future. He's gonna be make Canada freer than we. That's what we
Freer,
thought.
richer, everything's going to be
We have good
better.
hopes. He fooled us with the weed, and then, you know, went in,
That was
went for
in
his dictatorship.
honestly, that was never a good reason. That's never a good reason to vote for anyone. It's like, I want
No.
my drugs. I want my fix. It's like, dude, that is not how you're supposed to make your decisions. That is not going to lead you to good results.
Oh, I'm more like to legalize all the drugs, but I would not vote just because of that. I would definitely vote for a third option that is no masks, no mandates, which doesn't really exist, in most of the places, that
Mhm.
option. So at least here we had some, like, or at least I've talked to some people just from the Libertarian Party or the PPC, and different levels of libertarianism. Not yet what I would like to see, but
What, like
maybe in
on the
Canada,
drugs
maybe
issue
United States,
or
in the libertarian principles. Because yeah, the PPC, it's very, it pledges for the conservative side. They are not open for drugs. They are very into the borders, which is like
yeah,
not very
they're basically
libertarian.
like a slightly harder
And
version of the conservatives, basically.
and now they are talking about abortion, and I was like, oh, that's the downside. I thought you guys were more libertarian than the libertarians, because really the PPC was the only party that was speaking against the mass mandates and vaccines around here. The Libertarian Party in Canada did their part, but they were talking about more specific groups and, health workers, some specific situations. And yeah, I would be like, no, freedom for everybody, not just for our friends.
You and I have like every opinion that people associate with fat, neck-bearded, fedora-tipping teenagers, don't we?
I don't know.
Atheist, libertarian, whatever. Yeah.
And I don't even have a fedora.
Yeah, I do.
Well, I
I
think I'm gonna have to
I
go.
only have it because I have, costume
I'll
related
I'll
stuff. I
have
had the
to
top
get
hat before
one
my
to
channel.
go take a picture when I meet you or Carl Benjamin,
Mhm.
the other
Mhm.
the other
I always like
fedora
to say that
atheist.
like my hat is just an extra tall fedora just for, containing extra fedora-y thoughts.
With so much pleasure. Thank you so much. Look, I said I was finishing it like 30
Mhm.
minutes ago. Sorry.
Yeah, yeah, well,
So
yeah.
so thank you so much. Let's finish recording here. Thank you so much everybody for watching. Thank you so much for your time, attention. This so much pleasant conversation, and let people know how they can follow and support you, get a hold of your work. It's a
Oh,
lot of videos, by the way.
yeah. At this point, just YouTube, Logicked. Don't forget the
Super
K,
simple.
otherwise it's Loggeist. Don't add a D, otherwise it's Logdict.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. And yeah, let me finish the recording right here, right now.
Mhm.
Bye. See you guys next video.
See ya.